When I tell my story, I'm often met with skepticism. And why shouldn't people doubt me? The concept in popular culture about Alzheimer's disease is that it is genetic with a steady, inevitable progress to the grave. Most people have known someone, likely in their own family, who developed the disease and followed that seemingly inevitable path of memory and cognitive degeneration. I don't mind telling you that I sometimes wonder about the reality of my disease myself, until I remember how my life was in 2015 and 2016. So, is my story credible? Am I somehow unique? Let's take a look. I once read an article in the New York Post about two people who claimed to have reversed their biomarkers for Alzheimer's disease through changes in diet and exercise. Biomarkers are physical evidence of a disease, such as brain scan or blood test. Does their claim sound familiar? In my book, Beating the Dementia Monster, I make a similar claim about myself. The article referenced a documentary series on CNN about Alzheimer's disease, which in turn highlighted research by the well known diet doctor, Dr. Dean Ornish. The series was narrated by Dr. Sanjay Gupta. Dr. Ornish had been conducting research in how lifestyle changes can influence the advance of Alzheimer's disease, and he has now published his results. The key to understanding the evidence and the skepticism about our experiences is to recognize that the role of lifestyle is only obvious following significant and often difficult changes in lifestyle. So, not many people have actually done these things. Some people are already living well and or don't have any characteristics that make them especially vulnerable to Alzheimer's. Others have genetic markers and or have poor habits regarding exercise and diet. But it's rare to see someone actually change their lifestyle and record how it affects memory and cognition. So what does Dr. Ornish's research tell us when it actually measures biomarker changes? To begin with, it's important to understand that there's an important distinction between what are called longitudinal studies and randomized control trials. To date, the majority of the research on lifestyle and Alzheimer's has been in the form of longitudinal studies. You look at a population and take surveys on what people eat, what exercise they get, and so forth. You assume that they are telling you and themselves the truth about what they do and don't eat, and how much exercise they really get. Then you see how many of them develop dementia. Many longitudinal studies produce disappointing results, but my view is that this is because the quality of their data is very poor. On the other hand, in a randomized control trial, you change people's lifestyles and measure the results. Rather than rely on self-reporting and surveys, you either control the actual food they eat or you measure the chemicals in their blood to see what they've been eating. With respect to exercise, you supervise the exercise and measure it. Then you measure the results with intense cognitive tests, MRIs, PET scans, and blood tests. Oh, and then there's the control group, a set of test subjects who don't change their lifestyle, but are subject to the same results measurements. Obviously, the randomized control trials are much more reliable than the many longitudinal studies. However, they are much more difficult and costly to actually perform. What's important about Dr. Ornish's study is that it was a randomized control trial. It was not a longitudinal study. Now, Dr. Ornish uses the phrase for the first time regarding his research on reversing Alzheimer's disease without giving due to the finger study, which we hope will be confirmed by the US pointer study. The finger study was conducted in Finland and was published in 2015. It rocked the world of Alzheimer's research because it showed that actually changing lifestyle could affect the development or progress of Alzheimer's. The Alzheimer's Association is currently trying to replicate these results in the US pointer study. Of course, as we pointed out in our book, Dr. Dale Bredesen also claims credit for reversing Alzheimer's disease for the first time. So I won't personally claim to be for the first time. I'll say instead that I have company. I'd like to say I have a lot of company, but I don't. So my mission at this point in my life is to encourage as many people as possible to change how they live, hoping that, like me, they will be happier and live more ably. Back in July 2024, we wrote in our blog about Dr. Ornish's research. We were heartened that he not only found improvements in tests of memory and cognition, but he also found improvements in the biomarker evidence, especially Alzheimer's biomarkers in cerebrospinal fluid. That's now one of the two gold standard tests for diagnosing Alzheimer's. As our diagnostic techniques have improved, the gold standard tests for Alzheimer's have become tests of cerebrospinal fluid through a spinal tap and a PET scan of the brain. In 2015, when I was diagnosed, my care team employed an MRI in their diagnosis. And my MRIs in 2017 and 2018 were for someone in memory care. But an MRI, a PET scan, and measurements of my cerebrospinal fluid in 2022 found me normal, although the test results of my cerebrospinal fluid were inconclusive. Now, when I got these results, I don't mind telling you that it made me wonder about my initial diagnosis. Did the 3 or 4 MRIs I had between 2015 and 2020 misrepresent my disease? Or did my results in 2022 actually represent physical improvement in my brain? Dr. Ornish's study involved 51 patients between the ages of 45 and 90, all of whom had been diagnosed with MCI or early dementia specifically due to Alzheimer's disease. But only about half of these received the lifestyle interventions, the rest served as controls. The exciting news for me was that for the intervention group, Dr. Ornish found measurable positive results after 20 weeks. Over the same time period, the control group actually declined in measurable ways. 8 or so years ago, when I had begun to experience improvements in my memory and cognition, I asked my neurologist whether the lifestyle changes could actually influence my brain chemistry and the results of these biomarker tests. But she didn't know. My logic regarding the biomarker evidence is that if the lifestyle change results in normal memory and cognition, they must be forcing normal function and appearance in the brain. Normal function would include, for example, how the brain takes up glucose, which is what was measured in my PET scan. That's what the tests have shown. But I'm not a doctor, and this is my uneducated observation. The gem I found reading Dr. Ornish's research is that lifestyle changes resulted in changes of the spinal tap results of test subjects to near normal values. This strongly suggests that the brain chemistry of the test subjects who had been verified to have Alzheimer's disease moved close to normal. They didn't do PET scans because COVID restrictions affected their ability to conduct some tests. Nevertheless, this tells me that my PET scan and spinal tap were not valid tools for establishing whether or not I have Alzheimer's disease in 2022. My earlier MRIs are the best evidence, and they strongly support the Alzheimer's diagnosis. My doctor's diagnoses in 2015 were correct, and I have, in fact, been beating the dementia monster. So thanks for watching. I hope you find this information as interesting as I do. We have links in the show notes below to the research I mentioned in the discussion. There's also a link to our book, as well as a link to our blog. On the blog, we have more than 500 posts about Alzheimer's research and about my own progress. Thanks, and have a great day.